dead, you scum!
You won't get away.
I loved side-scrolling beat-em-ups. I really did. In the late 80s into the 90s, this was my favourite genre of game to play in the arcades and at home. So whenever I seen one on a trip to the arcade, I would size it up by watching the attract sequence and then consider if it was worth the 30p or so for a game. So when clapping my eyes on Run Arc for the first time, I actually thought this was an Indiana Jones arcade game, especially as The Last Crusade had just been released recently into UK cinemas. I mean, how could you not look at this main sprite and not think this is Indiana Jones? Even the setting, which appeared to be pre-World War II, matched the setting of the Intrepid Explorer movies. But once the attract sequence was done, the name of the game was revealed as Run Arc, or Growl as it was known in some regions. Not being associated with indie in any way, it didn't stop me from having a go, and my mates thought likewise, especially as this cabinet we found was the 4-player cabinet, and with a Ninja Turtles arcade game providing a decent amount of hijinks, we all thought this game would be pretty much the same. So of course, we had to give it a go. The player begins the game by choosing from one of 4 different forest rangers, each with a different amount of health, attack, strength and jumping height. The game is controlled with an 8-way joystick for moving the character and 2 action buttons which are attack and jump. The player can perform a variety of different attacks, punches, kicks and finishing blows, depending on the position of an enemy. By pressing both buttons while surrounded by enemies, the player can perform a special attack that strikes every nearby enemy. By pressing both buttons while holding the joystick upwards, the player will perform a longer jump. Along the way, the player can pick up certain weapons such as revolvers, rocket launchers and an M16 assault rifle. Which is interesting, as the game appears to be set in the 1920s. Yet the M16 rifle was not around until 1964. Bit of a blooper there by title, I reckon. The visuals also look like they're from the 1920s. Okay, I jest. But the visuals are almost as if they are a generation behind. All of the character animations are pretty stiff, with the main characters looking like they are suffering from rickets. In fact, almost all the other sprites look like they're inflicted as well. And then we have the abundance of wild animals in this game. These heroes are portrayed as rangers and they are battling evil poachers, so naturally you end up saving a lot of animals in the game. This is what happens if PETA wanted to make a video game, I guess. And maybe Taito spotted a gap in the market. A gap that simply didn't exist. Let's make a game where you save wildlife, said no one, ever. Well, not before this game anyway.
This is the end for you.
Oh no, he got me!
The backgrounds are really all just different shades of brown or grey. It's really depressing to look at, and overall the appearance is very cheap and lacklustre. The sound is not too bad though. When I was playing this game for the video, I hated these tunes, but I found myself humming this first level tune every morning when making my breakfast, and I can't explain why, but there you go. The rest of the tunes are not terrible, but the sound effects do drown out a lot of the music, and these are pretty bad in my opinion. The sound of the punches sounds like someone crushing a packet of crisps or tearing leaves off a lettuce. The sound of the weapons and the explosions are decent enough, just what you would expect from a game of this type really, but it would have been nice if they were a little quieter, that's all. There is a decent amount of sampled speech, and it is some of the clearest I had ever heard from a game of this era. The game is not huge, but it's quite challenging, and at times you can be overwhelmed with enemies all over the place. It seems like there are about a dozen enemies on screen, which was a huge amount for this kind of game at that time. The Ninja Turtles had loads of enemies on screen, but these all looked the same, or were just palette swaps. Runark has a few different sprites that are palette swapped, so actually, looking back on it, that was quite impressive. As with most multiple player games, the game was actually fairly enjoyable in 4-player mode, but in 2-player mode or single player mode, it was very tedious. Something was just lacking. Without 3 mates, the atmosphere of the game just was not there. And with games like Ninja Turtles and Golden Axe, those games were great to play solo as well as being great multiplayer games. Runark didn't really do enough to keep me coming back to it. It's quite baffling in a way. There are so many things Taito done well in this game. The soundtrack, the speech, the amount of enemies on screen. But for each good thing, there was a bad thing. The bland visuals, the overamped sound effects, and the lack of atmosphere in anything other than 4-player. It really was just another of those middle-of-the-road games. A home port did get released for the Megadrive, and I did end up hiring that for a few days, really just to see what it would be like. And the other reason was that when this game got released, the UK version of Streets of Rage had yet to be released, and I was really wanting a 2-player beat 'em up to play on Sega's 16-bit machine. Well, things got off to a very bad start with this port. The Mega Drive port of Growl can only be played by a single player, although all 4 characters are available for selection. The controls are identical to the arcade version. The player's special attacks can now be performed at any time, but they now drain a bit of the player's health. Instead of recovering health between stages, the player recovers his health by picking up apples hidden inside certain crates. The cavern stage was also redesigned completely. Also, the M16 has been replaced with an AK-47, which is still a factually incorrect firearm for the period setting of this game, as the AK-47 was invented in, you guessed it, 1947. I am so glad I only rented this game for 3 days and did not purchase it. The visuals should be locked up for assaulting one's eyes. They are very poor. In fact, this game looks more like a Master System game, and it sounds like one too. The arcade lacked any atmosphere outside of a 4-player mode, so by having the game as a single player, it practically ensured all the atmosphere was gone, sucked up by an atmosphere vampire or something. But the absolute worst thing about this port was the playability. It was just such a mediocre game, and as much as I slated the overamped sound effects from the arcade, at least it sounded like a right heavy impact on the enemy. In this port, that sound has been replaced with a sneeze sound effect. Everything about the game just looked and felt so cheap. A real lack of effort was given to the game as well, and not long after this abysmal release, Streets of Rage got released in the UK, so I'm not sure who this game would even appeal to after that. For all the harsh criticism I'm giving this port, I did persevere till the very end, for my sins, and I did beat the game that afternoon, and never played it again. In fact, I couldn't wait to return it to the computer store. Growl on the Megadrive is an example of how not to do an arcade port, and it was also a real wake-up call, as just the year prior, the Megadrive had been touted as this arcade powerhouse. But recent arcade ports like this, Shadow Dancer, E-SWAT and Moonwalker, showed that it could no longer produce the arcade perfect hits it had done with the likes of Altered Beast and Golden Axe. And with the Super Famicom looming on the UK horizon, the Mega Drive's position as ultimate home video games machine was in real danger of being usurped. But anyway, that was my look back at Growl. If you like this video, then please do give me a sub and a thumbs up, or maybe even a comment or two below about your memories of Growl. And a massive thank you as always to all those who have subscribed and commented on my channel. Your feedback and support really does go a long way in helping the channel grow, and I do appreciate all of the feedback and the support. So a massive thank you from me. And that's all from me, folks. Thanks for watching.